Welcome to our Wednesday evening service. And in fact, hold the phone. I'm going to do something. Boop, boop, boop. All righty, there we go. Okay, again, so good to see everyone here. We are going through in our Wednesday night classes. We are going through a look at comparing the Bible with the Josiah Manifesto, a book that just came out a few months ago by Messianic Jewish Rabbi Jonathan Cahn. The Josiah Manifesto, the Ancient Mystery and Guide for the End Times, which we keep getting closer to every single day. So seeing some thoughts that he has in his book and comparing with the scriptures and having some conversations, coming to our own conclusions on some things. So before we dive into that, one thing I want to share with you all. I just saw this today. So this is one of those things where I'm not saying this to scare anyone, just to keep us aware. What this is two lines here. The white is our current year from January 3rd to today, February 14th. The red is 1929 from August 7th of 1928 to October 30th of 1929. You may remember, not that we were alive for that, that was the big crash that led into the Great Depression and all of that stuff that came after it. So that was then, this is now. So, yeah. Yeah, you know. So the red is what happened in 1928 into 1929, the stock market crash. Yeah, of 1929. The white, you are here. This is today. That's today.
In the white.
In the white. And the correlation, 0.94. That means these are 94% identical.
Wow.
So there's something that be happening, praying that it is.
Yeah. So if it happens, you heard it here first. But again, our God is of course bigger than all this, and we are with him, he is with us, so he sees us through. So I don't present things to scare anyone. I do want us to be aware so we're not surprised when things happen and we do what we do.
How long did it last?
Oh, that's a great question. I'm so glad you asked that. The stock market crash was actually short-lived. What happened was the government. They passed something called the Smoot-Hawley tariff. They figured, hey, while this terrible thing is happening, let's pass another tax. Let's put a tariff on the trade and all that stuff. So that just sent things over the edge. And so, and of course, Hoover, unfortunately, did a lot of big government programs that just made things worse, and FDR just expanded on what Hoover was doing. Coolidge got out when he got out and was wise. But this wasn't brought on by the Roaring 20s. It wasn't brought on by people being reckless with the stock market. This was brought on by us. What really triggered it was bailing out the Bank of England when they went off the gold standard. And we should never have done that. And we took that on, we absorbed that, and that was too big a hit for us to absorb. And so our Federal Reserve existed before this, but amazingly, they didn't prevent this. They existed before this, and all these other crashes that have happened that we've suffered that the Federal Reserve is supposed to prevent, they're not preventing. So my take is abolish the Fed, get us back to the gold standard that Nixon took us off in 1972. By the way, during FDR's time, he confiscated the private owner's gold. Every private citizen had to fork over their gold holdings to the government. Yeah, so not cool. Yeah.
Gold rings and stuff like that.
Yeah, well, and he had fun just playing with different numbers, trying to see how they would affect the gold prices. Let's throw this number out. Let's throw my lucky number out. Let's just see. Yeah. So that, oh yeah, that was the question, wasn't it? That's it's in many ways. The stock market crash we recovered from, but then these other things that happened that I mentioned, they set us over the edge. World War II did not get us out of it. World War II, our involvement, 1941 to 1945, World War I was more government spending. And so what happened when the war ended, then we had a bit of a recession because, okay, we're not, pumping up for the war anymore, and the government's not spending like it was. So we had that adjustment as well. What really got us out of it all was Dwight D. Eisenhower, and the economy in the 1950s under him. And those policies really got, yeah. There was another big crash in 1938. That was, yeah.
All the way back.
We bounced back from the stock market crash of 29. We did not bounce back from the Great Depression until the 1950s.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
My mom was born in 1938, so.
So was Brother John.
Was that right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and, the thing is that, if we're in the gutter, there's only one way, is up.
You would think,
Yeah.
but government finds a way.
Well, because it's down right here, it went down there. and
Yeah, a little dip,
started
boop,
down,
boop, boop,
it
yeah.
worked its way back up, and then we
Yep.
fall again, so,
Yep.
Never meant for the government to save us.
yeah.
Thank you, sister.
Yeah.
Beautifully said. I could not have said that better myself. As one president famously said, some of the scariest words to hear are, "I'm from the government and I'm here to help." Yes. So speaking,
Did you see it was all of a sudden, but the comparisons to what's going on now and with the Roman Empire.
oh, yeah.
Half of the people were on welfare back
Oh, yeah.
in Rome, and the other half were working and they were taxing the crap out of them.
Yep.
And so as a distraction, they kept building these coliseums.
Let's just keep the people fat, dumb, and happy with the famous phrase was bread and circuses, or today, welfare and TikTok.
And they said they opened the gap,
Yeah.
open borders.
Oh, yeah.
All the other.
And that's where the barbarians came in. That's where the Goths and the Vandals and those different tribes. Oh, yeah. That was the fall of the Roman Empire, corruption from within and allowing easy access for those folks who really shouldn't have been a threat, but they were. So fun stuff. Yes. So what I thought we would do tonight, a little different. Let's go to the book of, let's go to 2 Kings, chapter 9. I'm going to do a little recap of what we covered last week and then move forward from there. But I thought I would do this recap a little differently. Keep in mind, as we're seeing the Bible connections with the book from Messianic Jewish Rabbi Jonathan Cahn, as I mentioned, there are 4 strands I've identified here. There's a strand of Moses and parallels in modern times. We saw that with, as Moses was born during the baby boy death decree. We saw that during the night from 1970, when states started making abortion on demand the law of the land, and you couldn't ban abortion, up to the point in 1973 with the passing of Roe v. Wade, which was really just the handing down of the ruling from the Supreme Court. From 1970 to 1973, going from the states to the nation, someone was born in that time frame, Amy Coney Barrett. Just like Moses was born during the baby boy death decree and would have an impact later on the nation that did that, so too Amy Coney Barrett was born during that time in 1972 in Louisiana. And she will, as we know and we'll see, have an impact on the abortion that was becoming the law of the land during her infancy. So that's one. There's Moses, and that will come into play more as we go. Another is King Jehu, and we started talking about him last week, and we'll talk even more so. We've read the scriptures in an earlier class. We'll refresh some of them tonight, and how Jehu, king of Israel, wild and crazy guy he was. Sure enough, in recent times, we've had someone on the national stage, wild and crazy like him. Go figure. The third strand is Joel, and we saw the prophecies of Joel playing out in real time in Cuba, and how in Cuba, after the 40-year period of Castro's regime, he opened up for a month of revival that Jonathan Cahn was a participant of, and that as the book of Joel was being proclaimed, it was actually happening in real time with plagues of insects, with the darkness, with the rain, and the pouring out of all these different things were happening, and that was kind of fascinating. And we saw also last week that when it came to Castro, that not only was there that spirit of revival of Jubilee happening among the people in spirit, but the actual timing of Jubilee played out. Castro ended up resigning February 18th of 2008, exactly 50 years, on the 50th year to the 50th day of when Batista resigned before him, New Year's Eve of 1958. So everything just played out. The rise and fall of Castro played out exactly with the Bible Jubilee, which is a return to what was before, a undoing of what has been done. And so we saw that. And that was a Sabbath year, 2008. We are now going to be picking up in the Sabbath year of 2015. So what exciting, fun thing am I going to do for us? I am going to not say anything about modern times. I am only going to read the Bible and some of Jonathan Cahn's commentary on the Bible. But while I'm reading the Bible, I'm going to have on screen events from modern times. Some of these we had last week. And we're just going to read the Bible as a narration of what we're seeing on screen. And we are going to see, is 2 Kings chapters 9 and 10 actually playing out in our lifetimes? So let's try this experiment here. So let us begin with slide number 307. Boom, 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 boom. Not all these slides are for our current class. These are inserted amongst the ones we've already done. So, okay. So boys and girls, let story time begin. We're going to talk about King Jehu. Watch the visuals while I talk about the guy in the Bible. We're here about the Bible. Jehu was a controversial and polarizing figure. He was loved by some, hated and feared by others. As with Jehu, his faults and ways do not nullify the fact that he is used as an instrument for God's purposes. The fact that Jehu is used of God as an instrument for God's purposes, that doesn't nullify Jehu's faults and ways. God will use whom he will. Jehu was a warrior, a fighter. The biblical account of Jehu's rise to power presents a picture of wildness, impulsiveness, and unpredictability. Now, boys and girls, let's go to 2 Kings chapter 9. We'll pick up in 2 Kings chapter 9, verse 19. 2 Kings 9, 19, and 20. So Jehu is riding on his horse, heading into town. He's seen, and they send messengers over to him to see what's going on. And the messengers don't come back to report. So 2 Kings 9:19, he sent a second horseman, came to them and said, "This is what the king says, is your intention peace?" And Jehu answered, "How is peace any business of yours? Turn and follow me." And the watchman reported, "He came up to them, but he did not return. And the driving is like the driving of Jehu, the son of Nimshi, for he drives furiously." So Jehu's ascent to the throne began as he mounted a chariot and embarked on a race to the capital city and the seat of governmental power. Jehu was said to have driven his chariot on as one who was crazy, a madman, if you can believe it. Now we'll skip down a couple verses and talk about Jehu, Jezebel, and Ahab. So we're going to talk about Jehu, Jezebel, and Ahab. So, boys and girls, join me in verse 30. When Jehu came to Jezreel, Jezebel heard about it, and she put makeup on her eyes and adorned her head and looked down through the window. As Jehu entered the gate, she said, "Is your intention peace, Zimri, his master's murderer?" Basically calling him out for turning against what they once all had together. Jehu, let's see, yep. Now, let's go over to chapter 10. And we'll bounce back between the two a little bit. Chapter 10, verse 15. Next slide, please. You'll know it is time to turn the page. Let's see. Now Jehu and Jehonadab. 2 Kings chapter 10, 15. Now when he had gone from there, Jehu, he encountered Jehonadab, the son of Rechab, coming to meet him. Now, the Rechabites were famous for their loyalty to their father's code of morality and abstaining from alcohol and being very spiritually minded. So, Jehu greeted Jehonadab and said to him, "Is your heart right, just as my heart is with your heart?" Jehonadab answered, "It is." Jehu said, "If it is, give me your hand." And he gave him his hand, and he pulled him up into the chariot. Then he said, "Come with me and see my zeal for the Lord." So he had him ride in his chariot. So Jehu formed an alliance with one particular man who represented the religious conservatives of the land, Jehonadab. Jehonadab was known for his piety, his lifestyle of abstinence from alcohol. Jehonadab accepted Jehu's invitation to join him in his chariot. The two men then rode together in Jehu's race to the throne. Now let's go down to verse 27. Because something happens somewhere in another land. Let's see, right there. 2 Kings 10, verse 27. They also tore down the memorial stone of Baal and tore down the house of Baal, made it a latrine as it is to this day. So Jehu eradicated Baal from Israel. So while this is happening, and I will make this one commentary, while this is happening in the States, the temple of Baal is being blown up by ISIS in the Middle East. The ancient paradigm is manifested. As Jehu rises, the temple of Baal falls. God bless you.
Is this another one of those things where you're like, how many coincidences does it take?
You tell me. Are we there yet?
No. I just
So,
don't know.
during Jehu's ascent to power, the most prominent advocate of Baal worship was the nation's former first lady, Jezebel, including the child sacrifice and abortion and things like that. As the two ancient figures came head to head in what was their final showdown. So, go back to 2 Kings chapter 9. Verse 32, we'll see Jehu's response to Jezebel putting on her makeup and charging him. Verse 32, then he raised his face toward the window and said, "Who is with me? Who?" And 2 or 3 officials looked down on him. And so, that, and go to our next. Then he said, "Throw her down." So they threw her down, and some of her blood spattered on the wall and the horses, and he trampled her underfoot. And that's the end of Jezebel. And so we see when Jehu came face to face with the nation's former first lady, it meant her downfall. Jehu prevailed and proceeded to take the crown of kingship. Yeah. Now, about this, go right back here real quick. The former first lady of Israel, Jezebel, whom Jehu had defeated, Jezebel was on the national stage for 22 years with her husband Ahab, and then on her own 14 years. Do the math, it works. Let's go back to 2 Kings chapter 9 for a little bit, and we're going to go backwards here because those will also involve a little math. Second Kings chapter 9, verse 14. So Jehu, the son of Jehoshaphat, the son of Nimshi, conspired against Joram. Now Joram was with all Israel, was defending Ramoth Gilead against Hazael, king of Aram. But King Joram had returned to Jezreel to have himself healed of the wounds which the Arameans had inflicted on him when he fought Hazael, king of Aram. So Jehu said to the other men, "If this is your intent, let no one escape from the city to go tell about it in Jezreel." Then Jehu rode in a chariot, went to Jezreel, since Joram was lying there recovering. Ahaziah, the king of Judah, had come down to see Joram. Skip down to 22. Verse 22, after the whole thing with riding furiously, when Joram saw Jehu, he said, "Is your intention peace, Jehu?" And he answered, "What peace, as long as your mother's Jezebel's acts of prostitution and witchcraft are so many." So Joram turned back and fled, said to Ahaziah, "There is treachery, Ahaziah." Then Jehu drew his bow with his full strength and shot Joram between his arms. The arrow went through his heart, and he sank in his chariot. So back up now to 369. Here. Jehu succeeded Joram. Joram had been in power on the national stage for 12 years. There was the 8 years in office that we saw, and then there was what happened 4 years before that to bring it to a total of 12 years. Jehu came to power at the end of Joram's 12 years. So, have we seen 2 Kings chapter 9 and chapter 10 play out in real time? Now, any reactions or thoughts or questions on any of that?
Playing out in the United States. What about the rest of them?
The United States is in a unique position because on April 30th of 1789, our first president at his inauguration, along with the first joint session of Congress, dedicated this nation to God, submitted ourselves to God, desiring his blessings and putting ourselves, making a vow that if we depart from God, we would invoke what happens when we separate ourselves from God.
So you're saying that we mirror this? Because I think I've mentioned, I have that book, The Paradigm, which is very hard to read.
Yes, it
very
is.
difficult to read. And when I told Eric I wanted to read it, and it at first I was kind of like, how can you draw these kind of conclusions? I mean, this is crazy.
You don't normally call someone a Jezebel.
Well, right, and especially because she's not an evil person. I don't believe she thinks she's evil, or I don't think any of these people think they're evil, right? I mean, we're not.
Neither do I in mine.
Right, but we're talking on a different level here. But in the book, there are just some things that are laid out, and and I fact check everything, right? And it was just eerie. It was really, really, like say, how do you, and so, but then are there other leaders that would fit into these molds as well, like Clay said, I mean,
If the shoe fits.
people in other.
Again, patterns repeat.
Yes, they do. Yes,
Thing
they do.
didn't think it'll go along with, they said it goes along with the timing, the Jubilee and
Right,
all that, when all this is happening,
right.
so.
Yeah.
But I had a question about, in the reading, it says they broke the pillar or whatever,
Mhm.
veil.
Yep.
And made a tree out of it. So what did ISIS blow up and why did they blow up?
They blew up what had been there for 2,000 years. Was there were actually 2 temples to Baal, and there was the arch that was the gateway going through the walkway to them. These were part of Mesopotamian history for, like I said, had been standing for 2,000 years. Abraham actually passed through Palmyra on his way down from Haran into the Promised Land. It was called a Tadmor back then. And so what they did, ISIS coming in, wanting to undo everything and remake everything in their image, they blew up, as we saw the image of those temples.
Is that the one also that they put on tour?
Yes. What happened was the recreation of the arch was made and actually came to America and was put on tour, as I mentioned in our earlier classes. Yeah.
And we were like, why would they have,
Yeah.
a
Here is the
recreation?
archway to the gateway into child sacrifice.
Children,
Yeah.
we talked
And let's
about
celebrate this.
that. Yeah.
Stay tuned. More to come. So I know that for those of us, which is all of us, who lived through this, how the 2016 election cycle, that was a pretty intense time. The 2020 election cycle was a pretty intense time. Looks like the 2024 election cycle might be a pretty intense time. All this intensity is a lot of wear and tear. Sometimes it can drive you crazy. Sometimes it can wear you down. So good news, ladies and gentlemen. I thought I would do us all a favor and step away from the intensity, and in the spirit of love and joy and lightheartedness, I'm going to ask you all to indulge me, and I want us to be able to laugh about all of this, because I'm going to share some things that I hope will make us laugh or smile, at least, if nothing else.
They could be nervous.
That's my job. Yes.
Yeah.
Now-
They could be nervous.
We know that minstrels and balladeers, they would often chronicle events that are happening and relate them in song. So that'd be recorded history, but also capture the feeling and the essence of what was happening. So there is one such person who has done such a thing. He is now passed, a Christian artist by the name of Carmen, who wrote a song about this time in 2016. I hope again we'll be able to laugh a little bit here. That is 3, 2, 1. Pass the ads, skip. Okay, let's see. Dismiss, make big. And the subtitles are silly, so I'll spare you that. So here we are, The Trump Blues by Carmen in 2016. Oh, wait a minute. Here, you can pause right here. The sound's actually going over there. Pause, pause, pause. Sorry, I'm gonna do this. See, I didn't get here in time to set up, so let me do this. That, do the speakers, that's what I have to do. Speakers, speakers. You know what, I'll just keep it simple and I'll just move this over there. There we go.
Oh my God.
I know. You don't remember this when it happened?
Not the song, no.
I actually saw him in concert once upon a time.
Later, he said November, I'm the man who's going out to Washington and kicking a few cans. I trade deals a lot, but they don't care who don't. Get back, political hacks, I'm going to drain the swamp because I'm feeding hard. The biggest upset you will ever see. The left's going crazy. The media stuff. Afraid someday they'll have to say, President Trump. Obama is doing this little markup is small. He said, I ain't intimidated. I said one thing that's true at all. What do we do about Hillary too and all her email stuff? The people still say Hillary dang man is smart up because I'm king. The biggest people upset you will ever see. The left's going crazy. The media stuff. President Trump. He said, I handle Russia, China, ain't no sweat. Mexico, still don't know who they're dealing with yet. I'm telling all illegals, so hear me one along. I got news, I'm changing the rules, I'm still don't be so back. Now Hillary's crying, she's mad and she's ill. She's blaming everybody and throwing dishes at Bill. The president of panic. Man, why does he make us wait? Well, Hillary's better than that on Twitter. Hey, you and me, the people upset when you see they even try to recount that teamwork, actors were named all white folks in the USA, named Russian, Mickey and Minnie, the KKK. Snowflakes tried, America had its way, and now we all have to say. So our commander in chief today, Mr. President.
So that kind of captured the essence of what was happening at that time.
Oh my gosh. That's too much.
Oh, you can't say too much because I got something else.
No.
All over the earth, God is raising up a new breed of wealth builders who will use their money to shape the course of world history without.
Go, I say, young man, when you're short on your no, you can say that. That's for you, I've been
I thought there were more moves to that song, but anyway. So again, I hope we can all laugh.
It's just hard to,
Go ahead.
for me, I mean, it really is. I don't, it's just hard to think of anything being connected biblically, like when you brought up the stuff about Mark Twain.
Mhm.
That was amazing to me. That stuff I'd never heard before. So it's just hard to me to look at history, whether it's now or, in the not too distant past, and to place that in to the Bible, even though that's what we're supposed to do. I mean, right? I think we think sometimes that the Bible is this thing that's just so over here, and especially with someone as polarizing as President Trump. Especially, with all of his,
Yeah.
shenanigans,
Like Jehu.
I just, Eric and we fought more. And that whole lion Ted thing, oh my gosh, we fought.
So Genesis chapter 17.
Oh,
What's that?
Genesis chapter 17. Verse 5. So we are now in the year 2017, Jubilee of sorts, Jubilee for the nation of Israel, the UN declaration announcing the statehood of the nation of Israel. Genesis 17, verse 5. Genesis 17, verse 5. God says, no longer shall you be named Abram, but your name shall be Abraham. For I have made you the father of a multitude of nations. The name Abraham means father of the many. That is exactly what he became. Now let's go to Exodus chapter 2. We just covered this recently in Sunday school. I'm pulling up my next slide here. Last from the past. There we are, right there. Exodus chapter 2. Verse 10. Exodus 2:10. The child grew, she brought him to Pharaoh's daughter, he became her son. And she named him Moses and said, because I drew him out of the water. The name Moses means to draw out. Thus, he drew out the nation of Israel from Egypt. Go to Judges chapter 6. Yes, we're going to tie this into 2017. Judges chapter 6, verse 11. Then the angel of the Lord came and sat under the oak that was in Ophrah, which belonged to Joash the Abiezrite, as his son Gideon was beating out wheat in the winepress in order to save it from the Midianites. The name Gideon, this is our introduction to Gideon. The name Gideon means one who cuts down. Thus, Gideon is the one who had cut down the armies of Midian. Flashback to the Six-Day War of 1967. 50-year-old, the Jubilee, 50-year-old Rabbi Shlomo Goren, Shlomo is the Hebrew word for Solomon. Shlomo Goren, the name Goren, as in Rabbi Goren, in the language from which it originated, the name Goren means horn. So the man named Horn was born to blow the Jubilean horn at the Jubilean moment at the restoration of Jerusalem in the Six-Day War, when he's 50 years old. In other words, the central instrument in Israel's Jubilean restoration was a man bearing the name of the central instrument of the Jubilee, Rabbi Horn. Now let's quickie New Testament, then we'll back to the Old. 1 Corinthians chapter 15. First Corinthians chapter 15, verse 52. 1 Corinthians 15:52. In a moment, in the twinkling of an eye, at the last trumpet or trump, for the trumpet will sound, the dead will be raised imperishable, and we will be changed. Amen. Let's go to Numbers chapter 10, verses 1 through 10. The Lord spoke further to Moses, saying, make yourself 2 trumpets of silver. You shall make them of hammered work. You shall use them for summoning the congregation and breaking camp. Now when both are blown, all the congregation shall meet you at the entrance of the tent of meeting. But if only one is blown, then the leaders, the heads of the divisions of Israel, shall meet you. And when you blow an alarm, the camps that are pitched on the east side shall set out. Then when you sound an alarm the second time, the camps that are pitched on the south side shall set out. An alarm is to be sounded for them to break camp. When convening the assembly, however, you shall blow the trumpet without sounding an alarm. The sons of Aaron, moreover the priests, shall blow the trumpets. This shall be a permanent statute for you throughout your generations. And when you go to war in your land against the enemy who attacks you, then you shall sound an alarm with the trumpets, so that you will be thought of by the Lord your God and be saved from your enemies. Also on the day of your joy and at your appointed feasts and on the first days of your months, you shall blow the trumpets over your burnt offerings and over the sacrifices of your peace offerings. And they shall be a reminder of you before your God. I am the Lord your God. So the King James Bible, speaking of the trumpet of God to be sounded in the last days, calls it the last trump. The central instrument in the Jubilean restoration of 2017, when the embassy was moved back to Jerusalem, the central instrument of the Jubilee, the central instrument in the Jubilean restoration bears the name of the central instrument of the Jubilee, President Trump. So him and Rabbi Goren, 2 Jubilees, 50 years apart, 1967, 2017, 2 Jubilees, 2 instruments, a rabbi whose name means horn, and a president whose main name means trumpet. Yep. Pharaoh was used of God, yes, absolutely. Yes. God will use who he's going to use, is the point. Yeah. That's why we don't get too focused on person. Yes, absolutely. He used the Roman army to devastate Jerusalem in the year 70. Yeah, he used the Syrians to attack his people. You know, Joel talks about that. The great army of the Lord that Joel talks about is the army of the bad guys used to punish the Lord's people. If you actually read the book of Joel, that's what it talks about there. And so let's go to 371. So 2017. Yes.
When we look at all the political stuff, we should look at it through the eyes of the Bible.
We should also not get too caught up on the personalities and step back and see the person of God. You know, raising up good and bad, bringing out his ultimate purpose in a bigger picture. Don't get too between the forest and the trees. Don't miss the forest for the trees, but don't miss the trees for the forest either. Sister Roberta.
You missed the heavenly glory.
Yeah, amen.
I remember early in my career because there was just so much going on. But I tended to not study, but I was kind of drawn to a lot of like the underground churches, like the underground churches in China.
Yeah,
And where there is a lot of political stuff.
yeah,
But a lot. But one of the things that he was missionary to China. He said, we don't focus on the political stuff.
Amen.
God is sovereign, he's gonna have his way.
Yes.
We focus on people. We
exactly.
focus on getting the gospel of Jesus Christ. We focus on people believing that there is a hope, that there is a God, that there is a Christ, the good news, the gospel of
Amen.
Jesus Christ. That is what I tend to do. I'm gonna cast my vote, and once I voted,
Yeah, we leave it to God.
Exactly.
But I kind of love that Jesus was even modeled that. Give
Yeah.
Caesar what belongs to Caesar.
Yep.
And give God
Right,
what belongs to him.
right,
And I love that in spite of all the political unrest that Jesus was facing, he
right.
was still concerned with the woman
Yes.
as well. He was still concerned with the woman caught in adultery. He
Absolutely.
was still, and that's where, those are the stories that, you know, that we have as models, and I think it is, and examples of where our focus should be.
Absolutely.
And it's on providing,
As a
you know,
servant.
as a servant to Jesus and the good news, you know.
And that's
This
what's-
is gonna come
yeah.
and go, and it's gonna repeat itself. It's going
Yep.
to, it's not new. It's new to us, but it's not new to God.
Exactly.
And so, yeah, I didn't watch all of this. on
Yeah,
TV.
so why? And you're probably a lot happier person. So, and so here we see that God is masterfully at work and using people of God, using people not so of God, but always accomplishing the things of God.
And who will we be?
Exactly. Are we going to be the people of
Which one
God?
will we
Yeah,
be?
exactly.
You
And so that's why we have our civic duties and our civic responsibilities to be, as Christians, be good citizens in our community and be standing for godly values in our community. But ultimately, the things that are out of our control, we do what's in our power. Like you said, I vote, then it's out of my, yeah, we leave to God and we seek him and trust. But we want to be looking for him and seeing his hand behind the scenes of things. That's what we don't want to miss. As he is moving in the big things, that reminds us, big God moving the big things can move in the little things of my heart and your heart and my life and your life and their lives. So absolutely. Brother Peter.
You know, I see the world, you know, it's erupting everywhere. And, you know, I can't understand with my, you know, thoughts and everything, what the world's doing. But for my mental, you know, mind, you know, I love the Lord. I say, you know what, God, I'm listening to your plan. I see what's happening. We have a choice in everything that God gave us a choice.
Absolutely.
And sometimes our choices, they're gonna change what God's plan is.
Yeah,
And I can always go with God's plan, whatever it happens.
that is it.
And then we're, like I said earlier, we're supposed to pray for our leaders.
Yeah,
No matter who it is.
absolutely.
We still gotta pray for them, because
Yeah.
God use that person.
Well, here's a great example. We talked about King Jehu, and he did some amazingly good things. He was anointed by the prophet Elisha when Elijah was having his bad day and was on Mount Carmel. Oh God, I'm the only one. God says, not only do I have 7,000 who haven't bent the knee, but guess what? I'm also going to have an anointing. There's going to be an anointing of Jehu. There's going to be an anointing of Elisha, and then Hazael later on, which is its own wild story. And so Jehu is anointed by God to clean house and rid the land of the line of Ahab and Jezebel. That's his calling. That's his job. And so, absolutely, Hezekiah's son Manasseh was a horrible king. For 55 years, he reigned as king. But guess what? Did he need prayers? Yes. Guess what happened? He got captured by the bad guys as a bad king. Guess what happened? In his captivity, and Chronicles records this, he repented and got forgiven and got restored after like almost 55 years of his reign as a bad guy. Son of good King Hezekiah going bad for that long, yet there was redemption available for him. So even though horrible people can be put in positions of power and authority and abuse it, God is still sovereign, he's in control, and he is still working out his plan. So we need to not get too focused on the personalities, just see God's use of the position and God's good being accomplished.
How long have we been in this study? It's been over a year, right?
Oh, wow, yeah.
So when Eric, when Eric first started this study, he started at the very beginning, of course, because he loves things in chronological order, and he took us through all the different decades, right? And he's building these blocks and putting these jigsaw puzzles pieces together, and he's telling us the whole time, don't take my word for it, find your own convictions with it, and I appreciate that because I don't, always agree, but
Yeah.
but to
There's some
see
things I differ
this-
from Jonathan Connell.
to see this, to where we're at this point now, where we're all living this and it's all, crazy and stuff. You can't deny that it was definitely, a puzzle being formed or a buildup of this. I mean, you took us through, everything economically, you took us through everything politically, you took us through these stories in the Bible.
And all the verses of the
And all
Bible
these
that they were
verses, right?
echoing.
And it was just such a monumental thing, and sometimes I didn't understand it, it was, and we would talk about it later, whatever, and sometimes things were just over my head. But seeing, like I said, you go through each decade, starting, and you explain to us the Jubilee years, the Shemitah years, all this stuff. This wasn't just a study that you could just sit down and grasp everything.
That's why we take our time.
That's why it's hard, even, even with all that, to think about, man, we're
Well,
seeing this.
and we get so caught up in moments. We have to remember everything that we just talked about tonight. This is like a snapshot. That's just one snapshot of the whole picture book unfolding. Don't get so focused on the snapshot and miss the picture that's unfolding. And so, yeah, if we take the benefit of all these classes we've had, all the pictures that are, you flip through and see the movement. Yeah, there's no denying the word of God is living and active and is playing out right before our eyes. So thank you for that. To wind down, let's go back to 2 Kings chapter 10 and our buddy boy Jehu. 2 Kings chapter 10 and how God is using wild man Jehu to accomplish God's will. 2 Kings chapter 10, here we are. Pick up in verse 12. 2 Kings 10, then he set out and went to Samaria. Samaria was the capital city of Israel. On the way, while he was at Beth Eked of the shepherds, Jehu encountered relatives of Ahaziah, king of Judah, related to Ahaz. And he said, "Who are you?" And they answered, "We're the relatives of Ahaziah. We've come down to greet the sons of the king and the sons of the queen mother." That's Jezebel. Then he said, "Take them alive." So they took them alive, slaughtered them at the pit of Beth Eked, 42 men, left none of them. So he is completing the removal of the line of Ahab as God has anointed him. Here's commentary from Jonathan Cahn on this. After defeating the former first lady, Jehu then directs his attention to the capital city of Samaria. The city of Samaria was filled with corruption, immorality, apostasy. Jehu came to the capital with one agenda. You guessed it, to drain the swamp. After defeating the former first lady, Trump turns his attention to the capital city, Washington, D.C. He has one agenda, to drain that swamp. So he and Jehu were on those similar missions. And we'll close the year 2017 with this little tidbit right here. The end of the Jubilee year of 2017, the Jubilee for Israel, we have this event that will tie in, because remember, the strand of Moses, the strand of Jehu We've got the strand of Joel. We've also got, I didn't mention the strand of Josiah, who the book is named for. And so we're going to see all four of these strands. Everything I mentioned ties to one of them. And we're actually going to see them all come together on one day. So Friday, April 7th of 2017, Trump makes his first Supreme Court nomination less than 2 weeks after becoming president. To replace the deceased Antonin Scalia, he nominates Neil Gorsuch. Gorsuch is confirmed on April 7th, 2017. Since Gorsuch is a conservative justice replacing another conservative justice, the appointment does not alter the balance of the court, but preserves it. And that is the end of 2017, boys and girls, for where we are at this point with Josiah Manifesto. We will pick up in 2018 with the events that go kind of wild from there. And we will see the Bible patterns playing out that we have witnessed and how the Lord brings out his good through it all. So with that, great stopping point for now. Any other reactions, any other thoughts, any other questions on the Josiah Manifesto Bible patterns we're seeing play out with these events right before our eyes? All good? Let's all stand and let's meet in the center, close out in our season of prayer.
All good enough. I guess
Cool.
this-
I'll take the help. Yeah.
didn't
never turn down help.
Hang unplugged yet.
Not unplugged, no. You can unplug the, yeah, you can take that. Oh, turn the mic off so we don't drain the battery.
Mike?
Let me go ahead and stop the share, stop recording. Let's meet in the center to our season.